Hello guys, I wanted to express my opinions here about MI5, MI6 and ambitions of Great so-called Britain to dominate the whole world covertly. So, in my opinion, I believe that President Zelensky is an offspring of a British movie director called Kubrick. So I want you to really concentrate on the following. Whenever some stuff happens on an international scale, they either blame Russians or Jews or Americans, okay? Or some Muslim, evil Muslim nation or North Korea, something like that. British have never been blamed for anything in the world, the British monarchy. So, and this Zelensky thing is an example of all of this that has been happening during thousands of years covertly to people, to the nations around the world. So, Zelensky, they say, originally is a Ukrainian. But if this campaign of overtaking of Ukraine territory by Great Britain, because it is meant to go underwater under some cataclysmic event, as well as half of United States is about to submerge underwater to from Yellowstone eruption event. Then, wanting to occupy this territory, Ukraine, they placed this president, and what happened unveiling at the global theatrical scene, we see as this sort of president who is Ukrainian. But if this whole thing is busted, and in case public opinion about Ukraine changes and it will turn around, or like right now, Ukraine is portrayed as a victim of Russian invasion. But many people, even in Europe, they started to wake up. Ukrainians, at least some of them, have these qualities to them, and one of them is gratitude. And I put this gratitude in quotes. And when people wished Russia to be poor and starve, from Europe, unexpectedly, this all turned around on them, and they are now being poor and are going to starve, and their economies are going to collide. Everybody can see it now. So, first of all, they are going to turn in on Ukraine. When they're going to turn in on Ukraine, this whole thing is going to either be torn apart, and they will say, oh, who made all this? And they will point to this person called Zelensky. And they will say, well, Zelensky is to blame. He started it. And they will never say who is Zelensky's real daddy. It is who is his sperm donor. And for me, he just looks a lot like a British director, Kubrick. Let's just say that this actor president with his director dad ever even get busted. That like there is 1% of this chance. Then they will say, well, Kubrick is an American. But Kubrick is really a British MI6 person. That's just the way it is, because Kubrick has this certain particular education, and there are photos from his own private house in the United States. He doesn't come from a simple, normal American family. He is from royal bloods of MI6. And this all is betrayed by the house that he created for himself in America, that he started to live in. Of course, he came from the outside. And this house inside, it was not normal American home. Like rich, lavish American home is usually high-tech and modern, because Americans, they just don't have this experience of palaces, etc., and so on. They didn't have these monarchs. And his house looks like a palace with these particular details to the house that just recreates the surroundings of where he actually comes from. So this is the scheme that usually happens. When there is war, for example, now with two brotherly nations, Russians and Ukraine. And people would say that in Russia they are told that Zelensky is not Ukrainian, that he is really Jewish. And they use this as an excuse to say that Russians claim that there are Nazis in Ukraine that are genociding population who prefer to be friends with Russians and speak Russian. So when this thing is busted, he will be called a Jew by Russians, because this is the theory that is spreaded, and he openly talks about this. He calls himself a Jew. And even if his real paternity and fake parents is being busted, it will be pointed to the director Kubrick. And they will say, well, he's American. Nobody will blame British for anything. It will either be Jews or Americans or Russians who will be to blame for it. And this is how they operate. These MI6 agents, when they commit all these atrocities around the world, these British, Dutch, Monaco, and so on, royal bloodlines, when they do it around the world, they pretend to be Jewish. So when there is rage around the world happening, the backlash from the masses, it will turn on the Jews. And Jews will be gassed in the gas chambers, like it happened in that psyop in Germany. In Germany, Jews were blamed for everything once again. In this World War II, Jews were blamed for everything. Because people who stood in the position of power, who were making the decisions, they claimed themselves to be Jewish, so that their true nature will never be busted. Anyways, I would like to talk about Zelensky and his psyops and his daddy a lot, and how important the symbolism is. So about this, I wanted to talk about Black Cube. And Zelensky and his marshal called Arestovich, who seems to be as IVF product of Vatican, of some homosexual pair. He doesn't seem to me to be Jewish or Ukrainian either. They came from a group which was an actors community called Black Square, and there was also 25th Quarter. That was a company that belonged to Zelensky. And let's talk about Black Square. And they have these things called coded names. So their surnames, their names are always coded. And when it comes to Stanley Kubrick, you will see that his surname contains the Rubik cube. Okay? And this has something to do with the shape of our Earth. So, the shape of our Earth is kind of interesting because it changes depending on where you are located. So I'm showing you the Earth Mother symbol. This is Makosh, and this is in order to counteract, dissolve, and bash the symbol that they are trying to impose on our minds, because symbols are very powerful, which is a black square. A black square to me means emotionally a depression, black square means coffin, and black square means chaos and death around the world, because they believe that this world should be destroyed and we would create something else. And why do they hate Jews? Because the Messiah should come out of Jews, they believe. Okay, Black Square, also known as the Black Square or Malevich's Black Square, is an iconic painting by Kazimir Malevich. The first version was done in 1915. Malevich made 4 variants, of which the last is thought to have been painted during the late 1920s or early 1930s. Black Square was the first shown in the last Futurist exhibition 0.10 in 1915. Period 1910-1913 is the work of Malevich was like a testing ground. He worked simultaneously in Cubism, Futurism, and in abstruse realism or elogism. Elogism was realized by Malevich in his newer artistic system. Elogism did not negate logic but meant that the works were based on a logic of a higher order. Elogism also has a law and a design and the meaning, and having known it, we will have works based on truly new obtrusive law, wrote K.S. Malevich. Thus, in the work of Malevich, a tendency to non-objectivity, to a planar organization of the picture which led him to supremacism was outlined. The original version of the name was the word supranaturalism, which probably arose by analogy with the supramoralism of the philosopher N.F. Fedorov. According to the art historian E.F. Kovtun, Malevich's suprematist method was that he looked at the earth as it from the outside. Therefore, in suprematist painting, as in outer space, the idea of top and bottom, left and right, disappears, and an independent world arises, correlating as equal with the universal world harmony. In this, Malevich comes into contact with the position of Fedorov, who saw the essence of artistic creativity in the fight against earthly gravity. The same metaphysical purification occurs with color. It loses its subjective associativity, colors local planes, and acquires a self-sufficient expression. Also see Dreykosen, Margaret, aerial perception, the Earth as seen from aircraft and spacecraft, and its influence on contemporary art. Associated University Press, Cranberry, New Jersey, London, England, Mississauga, Ontario. Mississauga, Sauga means blood. Okay, this was going on since 1915 openly, but before that it was done even in the 19th century covertly, like in 1882, 1854 by French. I think what they did, they originally decided to destroy Russia, and they decided to start with a symbology, because the foundation and symbology of Russia is the red square, which goes back to this symbol of Makosh. Makosh is a goddess of the earth, which weaves everybody's fate. And what you see here is the surface of the earth and the seeds. The ground is fertile, and it's been plowed. This is the meaning of this particular red square and the symbol of Slavic goddess called Makosh. So they decided to first turn into a symbol of black square. So they wanted to take over Russia by so-called symbology, black magic first. And that's what French did originally. Then it was given to British intelligence, and then turned into this covert movement of artists, so that this black square painting would be printed into subconsciousness of every Russian citizen. Because when it happened, they started to say that some man drawing just black square was a genius idea, and he was so futuristic, and so on and so forth. So I wanted to pay attention that this Malevich painter was in Kiev, and also how Stanley Kubrick has this coded name. So it's Rubik cube or the red cube. That's what he chose for his name, I guess, to be prosperous and fertile, and in order to create a lot of so-called products that he made into the movies. In the last step on the path to suprematism was the staging of M.V. Matushin's opera Victory Over the Sun. So Victory Over the Sun is what they tried to promote. Was the black square symbol that they started to get into the head of every person unconsciously. So a lot of people unconsciously don't understand how harmful those symbols are, such as black square. And before everybody turns on their TV, what they see in front of them is just that black square. The director of the glass photo gallery, Maria Borasovskaya, regularly publishes very funny short stories on her Facebook account with the title A Minute of Extraordinary Tediousness. With your kind permission, I'm retelling the story about Alfonso Alaez, the very one who was the first, even before Malevich, to paint an absolutely black canvas. Alfonso Alaez was born in 1854. You see, Alfonso Alaez is a coded name, AA11, same initials like in all agents. Alfonso is Alpha, Alaez is Allah is. El Allah means spirit or God. Was born in 1854 in Honfleur in the family of a pharmacist. Died in Paris 1905. He worked a lot in the field of chemistry, seriously studied the technology of color photography, the synthesis of rubber, came up with a recipe for freeze-dried coffee. In 1882, at the Vivian Gallery at the exhibition of Les Arts Incohérents, he exhibited a monochrome rectangular painting Battle of Negroes in a Cave in the Dead of Night. This work was the beginning of a series followed by a completely white work. Anemic maidens go to the first communion in the snowy season. A completely red harvesting tomatoes on the shores of the Red Sea by apoplectic cardinals. A perfect blue stupor of young soldiers seeing the blue for the first time of the Mediterranean Sea. The cardinally green pimps in their prime lying on their stomachs in the grass, drinking absinthe. And just a grey group of drunkards in the frock. And all this appeared 21 years before Malevich's Black Square, and 55 years before the appearance of John Cage's work 433 in 1897. Ale published a special album of the Ollendorf publishing house, Funeral March of the Burial of the Great Death. It was an empty sheet of musical paper without a single note. It's a sign of respect for death and understanding of the important principle that great sorrows are dumb. They do not tolerate any fuss or unnecessary sounds. The work was performed only once by a friend of Isla's youth, also from Honfleur, Eric Satie, who is considered the founder of almost all eras in European music in the first quarter of the 20th century. Okay, here you go. In 1882, Alphonse Allais painted the painting Battle of N-Word in a cave in the dead of night, which was a black canvas cloth in a shape to a square. In 1883, he painted an all-white painting, the first communion of chlorotically pale girls in the snowy season. So they organized these pandemics even back then. So this, I assume French, they went into Africa continent, Algeria, and they have these campaigns in all this Tunisia, Algeria, where the French Legion stayed. But before they did all that, they took over the minds of people, subconsciousness, by these artworks that they promoted to hypnotize everybody in order to bring death and destruction to the African continent, in order to enslave them and take over their land. The first Battle of N in at night. According to its location, it was assumed that Malevich Black Square at the time of the inscription was hanging upside down relative to the accepted position. 33. As of 2022, experts of Malevich believe that the inscription was made by a vandal until about 1919 and not by the artist himself, and Irina Vakar called the assumption that painting hangs upside down stupidity. Predecessors: Robert Flood, illustrator of the concepts of macro and microcosms. So they believe that as above, so below. So as it is in micro world, as it is the same objects and the same processes happen in great space as they do in our organism, in micro world. At the beginning of the 17th century, Robert Flood, an English mystical philosopher and astrologer, depicted a black quadrilateral to illustrate the primordial darkness of the universe before the appearance of this world in his treatise Atrisque cosmi maioris series et minoris metaphysica physica atque technica historia. Lawrence Stern, The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shady Gentleman, published in 1760 twice, shows black vertical triangles, thus 2 black pages were used in a literary work. This is 1716, guys. Book album by Gustave Doré, dedicated to the history of Russia in French, a picturesque, dramatic, and a caricature history of Holy Russia based on the text of chronicles and historians Nestor, Sylvester, Karamzin, Segura, etc. in 500 drawings with comments. 1854 begins with a drawing of a black quadrilateral. Published in France, this book was banned in Russia because they knew what symbols meant back then. So they, in order to subject everybody's subconsciousness, in order to manifest death to Russian Empire and destruction, they decided to first hack people's subconsciousness, collective subconsciousness, which is a library of symbols all humanity shares together, like a same history that we share. And the history of Russia started with the Red Square. Red Square is the heart of Russia. This is what they did to it. They published a book in French, of course by some agent in some occult, which basically said all Russian history in illustration. And the first image there was not Red Square, there was a black quadrilateral. And that's why, because people back then understood the meaning of symbology and what is called Jungian archetypes and how they can program the subconsciousness, it was banned. So pay attention to this. This is highly important. Back in the day, people used to travel across the country in Russia, and they would collect folk tales. And this is like a folk wisdom and folk values system, and symbols of power and what is dear to them, which has emotions attached to them, shown in symbology. The same is on the other side of the world, in American continent. And they also have these Native Americans there who had their own folk tales, and they had almost identical the wolf character, the eagle character, then there was a deer. Who else was there? A bison, a bull, a duck. All is the same, just like in Russia. And so they put the symbology into fairy tales, or folk fairy tales. And the censor of all these books that were issued in Russia as a fairy tales to be told to children since very young age, the main censor was the Tsar himself. First, the stories were reviewed by the military generals, and then they were passed to the final censure by the Tsar himself. That's how important fairy tales are. For example, in Russia, the creation of the world depicted this way. There was a lake to which a little duck flew and sat on and started to swim on it. and then it started to flatter its little legs, and the waters turned into this white matter, which is called protein. And this is how the world began. And this is what was put in the heads of young children in the beginning of their lives, so that all the symbology would be arranged correctly in everybody's mind. The suprematist coffin was sent by a train to Moscow, where Malevich was cremated. Malevich, in the act of cremation of the dead, saw the embodiment of one of the principles of suprematism, economy, but above all, a cosmic spectacle, just like Kubrick's movies. Confirmation of the idea of non-objectivity. His ashes were buried in a field near the village of Nemchinovka. In the field above the grave of the artist, according to suprematist rituals, suprematist white wooden cube with the image of a black square was placed. During the Great Patriotic War in 1941-1945, the grave is gone. Currently, the residential complex has been built at the burial site of the artist. Are Zelensky and Arestovich secretly anti-Americanists? Sentiments, sometimes the details betray the subconsciousness. Published on News.ru by Mikhail Shipanov. And after all, if we recall many bold miniatures and reprises of his beloved and highly profitable acting events company, the 95 Quarter, then there is nothing surprising in the fact that in addition to the t-shirts in La Che Guevara, there were also cotton creations with the stylization of the current Kiev catacomb prisoner under the Chilean President Salvador Allende and Nicaraguan hero Augusto Sandino. So here I have to remind you why the square is essentially earth symbol and how much the color is important. And the square means four corners of the earth, so called, and square also means that they made this calendar. So when they established that religion all over the world called Christianity, they also changed the calendar. That's why they established that type of so-called evangelists, those who wrote the gospel. And they were these Mark characters. Then there was that Luke character and the other two characters that have symbols standing behind them. So each one who wrote the gospel had some symbology behind them, like lion, Peter was a stone, and so on and so forth. So this whole thing also deals with calendar and celestial bodies. Moreover, both also opposed precisely American interference in the affairs of their native countries. Well, don't tell it to American taxpayers then. And they certainly did not humiliatingly swear allegiance to the overseas ruler, but boldly challenged the Yankees. By the way, now one of the loudest associates of Zelensky, without a doubt, Alexei Arestovich, again AA, is a retired major, a retired actor of the burned-out Black Square Theater, a star of TV series filmed in Moscow. And now, as we know, he is the creator of various kinds of fakes that leave no doubt among his compatriots about the inevitable imminent victory of the Ukrainian army, which it turns out does not surrender but simply redeploys, strengthening its positions. Black, another another news title. When this operation began on the 24th of February this year, these so-called stars, music stars, show business stars, they published certain images on their Instagram pages. So they are all into a cult, and they are all agents and influences on the mind of the young people. Okay, let's read the article. Black Instagram. Celebrities massively reacted to the news about the military operation in Ukraine. Most of them hope for an early peace. Evgeny Vasilenko at Daily Storm.ru. Storm, again, god of storm, god of thunder, god of war that they worship. 24th February 2022. This day, February 24th, will truly go down in the world history. Today, Russia launched a military operation to liberate Donbass. This news is now being circulated in the vastness of social networks, and of course, show business does not stand aside. Most celebrities began to post black photos on Instagram with a call to establish peace and understanding. Someone just posted photos of two fraternal peoples. However, the Telegram channel Craft, interesting name, correctly quoted Sergei Bodrov, who many years ago said that during war you cannot speak badly about your own neighbor. Russian stylist Gosha Kartsev just posted a black square that means no war. Really? This is the black square you posted. This started and you post a picture of black square and it's supposed to mean no war. I see. It was just like a little Martin. Martin means Mars, god of war in Rome. You see how he was standing with a billboard that was saying peace. There was like number 9 there, again, to this god of war thing, allusion, and he was standing there as a victim of Boston Passover marathon ritual. The play 4:33, otherwise 4 minutes 33 seconds, is a piece of music, a 3-part composition by the American composer John Cage for a free composition of instruments. This is how they do it. They get into our subconsciousness, they hijack it. So, for example, you don't see that someone's background on their Instagram that you follow suddenly changes into black, and they don't explain it, but this is something that simultaneously happens everywhere. And this all is, we are consciously unaware of it. The play 4:33, otherwise 4 minutes 33 seconds, is a piece of music, a 3-part composition by the American composer John Cage for a free composition of instruments. The duration of the work corresponds to its title in parts, starting from the first. It is 30 seconds, 2 minutes 23 seconds, and 1 minute 40 seconds, respectively. Throughout the performance of the composition, the members of the ensemble do not extract sounds from their instrument. So they try to hijack our mind by this concept of black nothingness, the Great Reset. Throughout the performance of the composition, the members of the ensemble do not extract sounds from the instrument as conceived by the author. The content of each of the 3 fragments are the sounds of the environment that will be heard by listening to the composition. The piece was first performed by pianist David Tudor at the benefit concert for contemporary art at Woodstock on August 29, 1952. No Such Thing as Silence. John Cage, 4:33, Yale University Press. The Nothing Book is an old blank page book released in the United States in 1974. Later, the book began to be referred to as a kind of conceptual action similar to The Black Square by Kazimir Malevich, John Cage play 4 minutes 33 seconds, etc. Perhaps this is due to its mention in the essay of famous popularizer of mathematics Martin Gardner, again Martin, Mars, god of war, god of thunder, The Significance of Nothing. Subsequently, other books editions appeared which, in addition to the cover with the title, were a block of blank pages. So in 2011, the British Sheridan Simoff SS published a book called What Every Man Thinks About Apart from Sex, consisting of blank pages, which, according to the author, should reflect his shocking conclusion that apart from sex, men no longer think about anything. According to the Daily Telegraph, the book is a big hit with student youth. See also Martin Gardner, name means god of war, Mars, god of thunder, born October 29, 1914, 777. American amateur mathematician, writer, popularizer of science, one of the founders of the Committee for Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, published over 70 books. Martin Gardner was born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, USA. He attended college at the University of Chicago, where he received a bachelor's degree in philosophy. During World War II, he served in the U.S. Navy for several years as a ship's secretary, a yeoman aboard the destroyer USS Pope. I guess all these ships is where they get to be born, because they are just basically the cloning is banned, and they have to use the maritime law in the Atlantic Ocean. His ship was in the ocean at the time of the end of the war in the surrender of Japan in August 1945. Gardner has an old-fashioned, almost 19th century Oliver Wendell Holmes kind of American mind. Self-educated, opinionated, cranky, and utterly unafraid of embarrassment. Adam Gopnik wrote in the New York Times book review in 1999. So about Japan, I have this comment. Basically, they said that United States bombed Japan, the particular cities Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and allegedly they were creating nuclear energy and nuclear bombs there, and that's why they were bombed. But nobody mentions ever that Hiroshima and Nagasaki were originally British bases. Yes, they belonged to Great Britain, and it was British bombing their own land. Just like I see on certain September, they bombed their own towers. And when they bombed them, people were saying that it was an inside job, so it was either Saudi Arabians who did it. This was the first option. The second option was that what was an inside job, that is, the Americans did it. And third option was published on Veterans Today, I think, by some French-sounding creature named Thierry Messan or something like that, that said that that German intelligence, when it all happened, said that it was a missile hit that was hitting from a Jewish submarine or Jewish Navy ship. So again, when something happens, and this again was repeated during this Malaysian Boeing tragedy, when when they said that Russian missile hit the Malaysian Boeing over Ukrainian territory, and it crashed. While before that, another Malaysian Boeing went missing, and they say there was among the passengers there were very valuable Chinese scientists who were into 5G tech, and they say that the first of the two of these Boeing's story was originally hijacked by electronic equipment and was shipped onto the American base. So they said it was hijacked by Americans, basically. And in Russia, this event was portrayed as, in the alternative news, that it was a Jewish base. So again, something happens. As a result of it, bodies get dropped from the skies over Ukraine with Malaysian parts of Malaysian jet and Malaysian passports and the bodies, and then people who come there to film the bodies, they notice, also those who observed all this being broadcasted across the world, who were the criminalists by profession, they said that the bodies were without any blood. So the creatures, they can't help themselves. Before they hijack, they also have this plan, like, what are we going to do once we capture these Chinese scientists who will work for us? What do we have to do with the rest of the passengers who are civil people? Let's just use them for organs. Let's drain their blood. That's what they did. And then they dropped from some aircraft, they dropped this broken original Malaysian missing aircraft that was Boeing, the missing Boeing, and also the engine that was not from Boeing. So nothing goes to waste because Boeing engines are very valuable. And again, let's say that again in alternative media, Americans were blamed, not Russians, Americans. And in Russian media, Jews were blamed. Like now, Jews are blamed for what has happened to Ukraine because Zelensky claimed to be a Ukrainian citizen. But nobody cares about the fact that the military base that they are talking about, where they say allegedly they brought that jet into, that base belonged to Great Britain once again. And the same with 9/11. Gardner has an old-fashioned, almost 19th century Overbeno Holmes kind of American mind, self-educated, opinionated, cranky, and utterly unafraid of embarrassment. Adam Gopnik wrote in the New York Times Book Review in 1999. New York Times is involved. Martin Gardner was born on October 29, 1914 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which we cannot check, of course. Maybe they deploy these IVF things that they create on the naval base or in the seas, in the waters, neutral waters somewhere, on these places of power where shamans live, like in Oklahoma, the Native American tribes, where his father, a petroleum geologist, started an oil company. As a boy, he liked magic tricks, chess, science, and collecting mechanical puzzles. Unbeknownst to his mother at the time, he learned to read by looking at the words on the page as she read him L. Franklin Baum's Oz books, in which Dorothy encounters characters from the Alice books and Geraldo Rivera. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz seems to be a hypnotic programming story for American world children at the age when they do not possess critical thinking, yet normalizes the dubious creatures that travel in search of organ donors. This is what I see as the Wizard of Oz, and how they gave the name to Australia, the Aussie, which was a mix all these animals and humans into chimeras behind the big fence. The British monarchy does this. Mr. Gardner majored in philosophy at the University of Chicago, from which he graduated in 1936. In 1937, he returned to Oklahoma to be assistant oil editor of the Tulsa Tribune at the $15 a week. Quickly bored, he returned to University of Chicago, where he worked in press relations and moonlighted selling magic kits. He joined the Navy and served as on a destroyer. While doing night watch duty, he thought up crazy plots for story, including the horse on the escalator. Do you remember these mechanisms that they constantly show us in movies? The winding staircases, the escalators, the elevators. Do you remember this movie with elevator in Stanley Kubrick, The Shining? How there was this elevator that was like flooded with blood. This is the kind of stuff they spell us with. After a stint as the editor of Humpty Dumpty Children's magazine, Mr. Gardner began a long relationship with Scientific American with an article in 1956 on hexaflagons, strips of paper that can be folded in certain ways to reveal facets, besides the two that were originally on the front and back. When the publisher suggested he write a column about mathematical games, he jumped at the chance. By his account, Mr. Gardner then rushed out to second-hand bookstores to find books about math puzzles, an approach he used for years to keep just ahead of his monthly deadline. The number of puzzles I've invented you can count on your fingers, he told The Times last year. The Times. Again, which kind of reminds me of the movie called Mercury Rising, which was probably another documentary just like Get Out. It's when the plot of the movie about Mercury Rising was they secretly published these puzzles in newspapers in order to find a person who would figure them out, and they used a trap as a, if you solve this puzzle, we give you a prize like $100 or subscription. And one autistic boy was able to solve the puzzle, so they decided to kill him, and they arranged like the whole Secret Service gang to follow little invalid boy around. Dr. Hofstadter, who succeeded Mr. Gardner at Scientific American, said Mr. Gardner achieved elegant results by drawing on fields from logic to the philosophy of science to literature. He conveyed the magical quality of mathematics, Dr. Hofstadter said. Mr. Gardner, who lived in Hastings-on-Hudson, New York, for the most of the years he wrote the Scientific American, resigned from the magazine in 1981. 2 years later, he became a column Skeptical Inquirer, Notes of a Fringe Watcher, which he continued to write until 2002. He had already begun beating his drum, debunking pseudoscience in his book Fads and Fallacies in the Name of Science. He helped found a committee for the scientific investigation of claims of the paranormal. In the New York Review of Books in 1982, Stephen Jay Gould, the evolutionary biologist, called Mr. Gardner the single brightest beacon, defending rationality and good science against the mysticism and anti-intellectualism that surround us. There was much more, including his annotated editions of Casey at the Bat again, and The Night Before Christmas. Night Before Christmas is popular tale in Ukraine about witchcraft. In his philosophical writing, Mr. Gardner rejected speculative metaphysics because it could not be proved logically or empirically. He wrestled with the religion in essays and in a novel that described his personal journey from fundamentalism, the flight of Peter from. He ultimately found no reason he believed in anything religious except a human desire to evoke deep-seated despair, so he said he believed in God. After retiring from Scientific American, Mr. Gardner lived for many years in Hendersonville, NC. His wife, the former Charlotte Greenwald, really, died in 2000. Besides his son James of Norman Strange, he is survived by another son, Thomas of Asheville, NC. All sounds like a British name to me, British surname, fake surname Gardner, and 3 grandchildren. For all Mr. Gardner's success in refuting those who take advantage of people's gullibility, he sometimes could not help having fun with it himself. In one Scientific American column, he wrote that dwelling in pyramids could increase everything from intelligence to sexual prowess. In another, he asked readers to remember the holiday that begins the month of April. Last recreations, hydras, eggs, and the other mathematical mystifications. 1997, Springer Verlag. Numerology of Dr. Matrix, 1976, republished as the Magic Numbers of Dr. Matrix. Prometheus Books, Mathematical Magic Show, Vintage, 1977. Hexaflagons and Other Mathematical Diversions, the first Scientific American Book of Puzzles and Games, 1959. University of Chicago Press, 1988. Flexagon. In geometry, flexagons are flat models usually constructed by folding strips of paper that can be flexed or folded in certain ways to reveal faces besides the 2 that were originally on the back and front. Flexagons are usually square or rectangular, tetraflagons. So, is this the shape of our Earth? Flexagon, tetraflagon. What do you think, guys? Or hexagon, hexaflagons. A prefix can be added to the name to indicate the number of faces that the model can display, including the 2 faces back and front that are visible before flexing. For example, a hexaflexagon with a total of 6 faces called hexaflexagon. In the end, I just wanted to show you the illustrations of what I was talking about. Look at how much 2 people are alike and they seemingly unrelated. What are the odds, guys? What are the odds? Actor Zelensky, Jewish wannabe. Movie director Kubrick. Many references in the Shining movie point to him being the ultimate moon landing faker. Look, the gestures are the same, the lines, the eyes, the nose, even the bird. Everything about them is the same, and he does it on purpose, like Boris Johnson with his hair that reminds of an Einstein hair. They do it on purpose because they are not allowed to say who their daddy is. I am the black cube of Saturn. I love sucking up your energy for my dark purposes. Black Cube, Australia, Manhattan, New York City, Cuba in Mecca. Black Cube in Denmark, Apple Store Cube North. Apple Store, New York City, rings around Saturn, that's followed by the Mecca pilgrims. Okay, the next one. This symbology, the cross unfolds into a cube. They hijacked every religion in the world. And this is the painting of this Malevich. It's called An Englishman in Moscow. So you know the song Englishman in New York, but this one is called Englishman in Moscow. And it's called Twilight. partial twilight.